By the time the banker finished explaining why his loan was impossible, Chris Morgan already knew he would never own that RV. He nodded, thanked the man who kept calling him sir while staring at the computer, and walked back through the glass doors into the bright Cleveland afternoon with the taste of humiliation sharp in his mouth. 25 years running into burning buildings, and he could not get approved for a used motorhome. On the sidewalk, he checked his balance on his phone and winced. The pension covered bills barely. Extras were fantasy. That was when the unknown number rang. A woman from a law firm downtown asked if he was related to a Lionel Morgan who had passed away in Erie, Pennsylvania. Distant cousin, he answered. They told him Lionel had left a small house and a mess of unpaid utilities, and they needed an heir to deal with it. Chris almost laughed. He could not buy an RV, so the universe offered him a problem. Still, a house was a house. 2 weeks later, he stood in the driveway of a narrow 2-story place 3 blocks from Lake Erie. Paint peeling, gutters hanging, grass winning the war with the sidewalk. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old carpet cleaner. He spent the first day filling black trash bags and arguing with the property manager who kept reminding him that taxes were due and the city might fine him if he left junk piled out front. Late that afternoon, he found the string to the attic hatch. The ladder groaned under his weight. His right knee, the one a ceiling had fallen on back in his firefighting days, protested with each rung. Up there it was hotter, insulation sticking to his forearms, plywood soft under his boots. Boxes everywhere. Christmas lights, yellowed newspapers, a busted guitar. He almost missed it. Jammed into the far corner under a ripped tarp sat a gray plastic container. Lid duct taped all the way around. A faded label from some moving company on the side with Lionel M scribbled in marker. When he tried to slide it toward him, the plywood sagged with a warning creak and he had to freeze in place, heart pounding, one boot half off the joist. The attic suddenly felt a long way from the floor. The next day he came back with a headlamp, a respirator mask, and a sheet of 3/4-inch plywood from Home Depot strapped to the back of his Tacoma. The kid in the parking lot had joked that he looked like he was about to bury treasure. Chris had just grunted. He was thinking instead of fire codes, structural beams, and the way rotten wood sometimes waited for the worst possible second to give way. He laid the new board over the sketchy section of attic floor and tested it with his weight. The house answered with a long dry groan but held. Crawling toward the container, he noticed the tape was not just wrapped but doubled over and heat fused in spots, like someone had gone over it with a hairdryer. On one side, a brittle sticker from a data recovery company was half ripped away. That word data pulled at a thread of curiosity. He got his first win when he managed to drag the container onto the new plywood without crashing through the ceiling. Sweat ran into his eyes, stinging. The respirator itched. As he maneuvered the box toward the hatch, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Downstairs, voicemail from the probate attorney waited with a reminder that the estate technically was not fully settled. Until it was, he was advised not to sell or destroy any property. He sat back on his heels, hand on the taped lid, and swore under his breath. The next mini disaster came from below. The neighbor, a man in a sleeveless shirt with a beer belly and a suspicious stare, pounded on the front door and complained that junk was being stacked too close to his fence. Last thing Chris needed was a call to the city. He promised to keep everything on his side, dragged bags farther in, and watched the man shuffle away shaking his head. By the time daylight began to fade through the attic vent, Chris had inched the container down the ladder step by step, hugging it against his chest while his bad knee screamed. He set it on the bedroom carpet and just stared. The tape was old but still tough. Whatever was inside had not seen light in years. His hands itched to cut it open, but the lawyer's warning about not destroying property echoed in his head as he reached for his pocket knife and hesitated. In the end, he justified it the way firefighters always do. If there is a sealed container in an old house, you open it to know what you are dealing with. He told himself he was securing the property. Then he sliced the tape. It peeled off in ragged strips with that dry, sticky sound that always raises tiny hairs on the skin. Underneath, the lid popped loose with a faint sigh of stale air. Inside there was no cash, no jewelry, no stack of forgotten baseball cards. Only packing foam, and under it a single item wrapped in a grocery bag from a chain that no longer existed. The plastic cracked when he unfolded it, revealing a thick, dust-filmed hard drive the size of a paperback, black metal, standard desktop model. A frayed SATA cable was taped to it with blue painter's tape. On one side someone had written in silver marker "Cold Storage 2011. The thing had weight. Real weight. Maybe 1.5 pounds. Old enough that his fingertips slid over a label printed with a logo he had not seen in years. Western Digital, 500 gigabytes. There was also a small spiral notebook under the foam, cover gone, pages yellow. On the first page a scribbled email address, on the second a long string of characters broken into groups of 4. Then beneath that the words "Do not lose this wallet." Chris turned the notebook sideways, as if a different angle would make sense of it. Wallet meant leather in his world, the kind that goes in a back pocket. Still, he had heard the news stories years ago about digital coins and people losing fortunes on old drives. He had even joked once at the firehouse that somewhere in a burned apartment they probably had melted $1 million in invisible money. That joke felt different now with the drive cooling in his palm. He dug out his old laptop from home that evening at his small apartment back in Cleveland. It was slow but functional, and the hard drive enclosure he used for backups still worked. He connected the SATA cable, snapped the drive into the enclosure, and plugged in the USB. For a few seconds, nothing. Then the old drive spun up with a thin whine, clicked, fell silent, spun again. His laptop screen froze, and then a new drive letter appeared with a name that made his throat tighten. Lionel Backup. Inside it were folders with dates from 2010 and 2011. Photos, tax documents, boring stuff. Then a small folder simply labeled BTC. He opened the folder expecting a couple of text files. Instead he found a heavy-looking file called Wallet and 3 tiny text documents with names like Seed and Instructions. When he clicked the Wallet file his laptop shrugged. No associated program. So he did what any retired firefighter does when technology outruns him. He called someone younger. The next day he took the drive to a repair shop squeezed between a vape store and a laundromat. The tech behind the counter looked about 19 and wore a hoodie with a crypto logo. When Chris explained that he had found an old drive with something about Bitcoin on it, the kid's eyebrows went up in a way that made his stomach flip. They plugged the drive into a clean machine in the back room. The kid downloaded an old version of a Bitcoin wallet program and pointed it at the mysterious file. For a long minute the progress bar crept while the fans hummed. Chris found himself counting breaths like he used to under smoke, trying to keep his heart rate down. Finally the software flashed a message about an encrypted wallet and asked for a passphrase. The kid shrugged. Without that, he said, it was a brick. Chris remembered the notebook. He pulled it out, flipped to the second page and pushed it across. The kid typed carefully. Wrong passphrase. Chris felt the air go thin. They tried again with different spacing. Still wrong. The kid explained that too many failed attempts might corrupt things. Chris leaned back and stared at the ceiling tiles, thinking about Lionel, a man he had only met twice at family funerals, always quiet, always slightly amused by the chaos of relatives. He remembered a detail his mother had once mentioned, that Lionel had never married and had a dog he treated like royalty. The dog's name, Murphy. On the notebook margin, half faded, was written Murphy plus a few numbers. The third try, using that exact combination, made the wallet program pause, think, and then open. A balance appeared on the screen. For a second he thought it was a glitch. Then the kid whispered, half reverent, that is 300 Bitcoin. The number meant nothing to Chris until the kid swiveled to another monitor and pulled up a price chart. When he saw the value, the total with all the zeros, his body did that thing it used to do when a flashover rolled across a ceiling. A full body jolt. His first instinct was simple. This cannot be real. The second was less noble. If it is real, who else knows? He had the kid disconnect everything and paid him in cash plus an extra 100. On the drive back to Cleveland, he kept checking the rearview mirror like someone might be following, even though no one besides that teenager and the quiet manager had any idea what was on the drive. Back at his apartment he called the probate attorney and, moving slowly, explained that a digital asset had been discovered. He asked the question he was almost afraid to voice. Was it really his? The lawyer called back after conferring with a tax specialist. Lionel had no other heirs. The will was simple. All property to Chris. Digital assets counted. The government would certainly want taxes on any sale, but legally the wallet belonged to him. Hearing that felt less like winning the lottery and more like being handed a fire hose with full pressure. Word began to leak anyway. The tech from the shop bragged to someone who bragged to someone. A cousin he had not heard from in 10 years texted out of nowhere, asking how things were going up in Erie and did he need help with the house. A local reporter left a polite message about wanting to talk regarding an interesting inheritance rumor. At the firehouse where he still dropped by for coffee, reactions split. Younger guys told him to hold the Bitcoin forever and ride it to the moon. The older ones joked that it would vanish the second he clicked the wrong button. One of the captains simply looked at him and said, "You know what we could do for the department with money like that? Burn center funding, counseling, families of guys who do not come home." That sentence followed him home like smoke in his clothes. When he finally sat down with a financial planner and a tax attorney, he arrived not with fantasy drawings of mansions but with a notebook full of scribbled ideas about grants for firefighting gear and mental health support. He told them he wanted two things: to never worry about rent again, and to make sure other first responders did not feel as disposable as he sometimes had. They sighed with relief. Clients usually wanted speedboats. Weeks later, after forming the paperwork for the Lionel Morgan Foundation and structuring a careful sale of a portion of the Bitcoin, he stood in an RV dealership outside Columbus, hand resting on the door handle of a used Class C with faded decals and good bones. The salesman had no idea he could pay cash. The way his friends tell it now, that RV became as much a symbol as the foundation. It was not glamorous. The upholstery was dated, the cabinets rattled on bad roads, and the shower never quite warmed up enough. But it carried Chris across countless state lines. From tiny volunteer departments in West Virginia that still used turnout gear older than their rookies, to big city houses in Chicago and Houston where firefighters lived with sirens in their dreams. Everywhere he went, a quiet check arrived a few weeks later. A grant for breathing apparatus in one town. Funding for a peer counseling program in another. A scholarship for the daughter of a paramedic killed in a highway pileup. Departments would send photos back. A crew standing in front of a new engine, gear clean for once. A plaque on a wall with the modest logo of the foundation and, under it, a line that simply read in memory of those who showed up. The money did not fix everything. It never could. Chris still woke some nights with his heart racing, hearing the ghost of an alarm bell that did not exist. He still rubbed his knee on damp mornings and thought about ceilings that might come down. The house in Erie sold quietly to a young couple who wanted a starter home near the lake. The neighbor with the sleeveless shirt went back to complaining about parking instead of city code.